people actually desire some sort of big event to happen and to finalize some sort of process. And like, firstly, because it's hard for us to perceive processes in the first place. And secondly, when we do perceive processes, we become jealous that processes may actually be bigger than ourselves, us as individuals. And we hate that. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this short video, I want to talk about, or rather, I even want to ask a question to which I don't even have an answer really, although I'll propose a couple. I don't have the answer, if you wish. So, about finiteness, or like, why do we desire some sort of finality to happen, to appear in the world, if you know what I mean. And what I mean is, like, why is there, or at least seemingly there is, this sort of strive, this sort of desire of big event, you know, with capital B and E. So some sort of like thing should happen, and then like we're all like, okay, finally we're done, right? So some sort of like finish line must be drawn, and like we want it, we strive for it. So we want something like, examples are given. Communistic revolution, for example, is an example of such big event, you know, after which everything would be completely different, right? Or, you know, some people talk about the Great Reset. That's also some sort of big shake-up event, you know, of reality. Or, like, you know, I mean, kind of a vaguely approaching these, there are some other, like, things, like Big Bang, for example. It's also this sort of big event, you know, which some theories at least require in order to work, some theories describing the universe in particular. So I'm talking about something like this, you know, like something big and like kind of finite, definite, or rather. And I think I talked about this in my video, the end of the end, probably, or it was bad ending. I'm gonna link all of this in the description, but in some of these videos I talked about the phenomenon of revolution and like how it happens and why it happens, etc., etc. But in this video we're more like, it's more of a dreamy kind of video, more about asking the question really, like, why do we want such a thing to happen? You know, like, for example, like what is also very popular today is various like end of the world scenarios, right? People love describing how a huge asteroid would hit the earth, like a huge blah 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 would happen, like the sun's gonna explode, like people you know I'm pretty sure like most of you know what I'm referencing to, right? Something like that would happen, and it's also an example of this big event. Almost like, again, world-ending event in this particular case. And of course we've described how Americans really love the end of the world scenarios, and we've also described why that is the case. But I think that not only Americans, after all, desire this, and so the question remains, why do we desire this? So, well, one of the reasons, I would say, or one of the proposals I would give to you as an answer to this question is our natural psychic inability to perceive processes. So, as human beings, we're surrounded by processes, like roughly speaking. I mean, process is also a model of reality, not reality itself, but it's a much closer model of reality than an event, right? But we're surrounded by processes and we don't understand them. First of all, that's one problem. And so we would like processes to be turned into events, if you wish, right? So we need some sort of like landmark events that would signify the underlying process rather than working with the process itself. And therefore, the process, you know, of life, of the universe, of etc., etc., we may, like, you know, put a flag on it with this big event that we're talking about, right? Then we have a feeling that we would understand it. And if you don't understand what I just said, it's perfectly fine. Like, it wasn't very well formulated, but hopefully on some deep intuitive level you get what I'm saying. So the first problem is, by the way, I also have a video about this, events versus processes. Watch my video in the description. Anyways, that's one problem. It's hard to comprehend the processes. And another problem is that we despise processes because we can more or less easily observe that a lot of processes, if not, well, not all, but a lot of processes are bigger than we are. And by we, I mean each one of human beings as an individual, all right? So a human observes some process, like, I don't know, like the development of civilization itself, for example, and they think, this process has been going on for at least a few thousand years, and my life will probably end in, like, I don't know, 30, 50 years. I don't like that, you know, like, so there is this inherent jealousy or envy, I don't know which is proper in this context, of like processes being bigger than us. And therefore, we kind of want to have our revenge on these processes. We want to say, aha, you know what? You're bigger than me, but there's gonna come a big event which would end you. And yeah, I will have my revenge, right? It will put an end to you after all. So that's why, or at least that's one of the reasons why a lot of people predict the end of civilization, for example, the end of Western civilization, the end of whatever civilization you prefer, the end of modernity, the end of blah, blah, blah. It's the way of having a revenge onto it, like paradoxically. Even though they say it in a tragic sort of way, but I think, like, deep down, they take pleasure in it. Because again, it's a form of revenge. They're saying, I am so smart, but I feel myself outside of it. So I'm a sort of like a deprived person, a poor person, like outcast, if you wish, of society. I don't have a lot of power. I don't have a lot of influence. I don't have a lot of women, for example, right? I don't have a lot of these things. So I'm just kind of, you know, at the, again, I'm a sort of an outcast. And therefore, I'm kind of having my revenge onto you by saying, well, all of this cool stuff that you have will end pretty soon, perhaps. Something like that. So, yeah. And not only like revenge on the civilization, on life itself. Because again, life is bigger than any individual, right? That's kind of the whole thing. Again, watch my video, Onion of Aliens, where we describe life, where I give a definition of life, actually. And clarify it in like 3 hours, even 4 hours, something like that. So 3 parts, right? So what I'm saying is that's kind of the point of life, is to be continued beyond the individual, right? Your genes live on, even though you don't. So this is the thing. And we as individuals kind of want to have a revenge onto this process. We're saying, wait, why am I just a cog in this machine? Like, I don't want to be a cog in this machine. I want to have, like, the world for myself only, or something to that effect. And since the world is not only for myself, I want to have my revenge onto it, right? Hopefully you can see the thing. So I strive for this big event to happen and stop the machine from working, right? Something to this effect. So yeah, basically this is a way, this desire of finality is a way of coping with our own finality. So it's a way of our revenge on reality. Also, I think another reason is, well, it's not like a reason in itself, but our like storytelling tradition is kind of important in this regard, because any story has an end inherently, right? So that's why kind of by like the way the culture developed initially as just a set of stories, by the way, watch my video, Nature of Knowledge, it requires some sort of finality. And so when we are trying to tell the story about the world, just as I've mentioned in my video, Nature of Knowledge, we kind of have to put an end somewhere, right? So when we describe any process again, we kind of have to say where it ends, right? How it ends. And therefore, anything we describe, almost by definition, should have some sort of an end. And, well, that's one of the reasons why we're so bad at describing processes in the first place. But yeah, I think it takes its toll for sure. One thing I want to mention is that it seems like this desire of finality is more pronounced in the Western culture, and even more so in Western culture of modernity. So there's a big difference between, let's say, modern European civilization, which is like very like striving for the end of the world, just following the Americans, obviously. And let's say Europe of, I don't know, 1600s, where people were building these huge cathedrals, you know, like every builder knew, I mean, it's a proverbial example, but every builder knew they would die long before the cathedral is finished, but they still worked on it, right? Like the architects knew that there's going to be some other architect replacing them after their death and finishing it, right? So there is this sort of desire actually to be a cog in the machine versus our current desire to stop the machine from working because we are pissed off by being just a cog in it, right? Something like that. So yeah, like some people I trust really well, from some, again, anonymous Telegram channels, Russian Telegram channels. They say that when you are in Asia, like I've actually never been in Asia, so, well, it depends on what you call Asia, right? So I haven't been anywhere eastern, to the east from Moscow, let's put it this way, right? So when you're in Eastern Asia or Southeast Asia, like it feels like time doesn't exist there, some people say. And like, from this, I would claim, there would be no desire to, you know, invoke some sort of big event to stop this time, which is bigger than ourselves. So the motivation for a big event would be absent, you know, in these cultures. So yeah, it's just a thought. I'm not sure it is the case. Like I'm just kind of giving you thoughts to ponder. So yeah. I mean, arguably, if you look at least like what is the, you know, sort of like typical representation of East Asian culture. By the way, watch my video about anime, how it's a reverse cargo cult, where I touch on it a little bit. But the usual representation of East Asian culture in the West, at least, is that it's very collectivistic, right? So it inherently works with these long processes, you know, Confucianism, like the respect towards the institute of something larger than yourself, either your family or your state or your nation or your religion, like something big, right? Again, you're just one of the builders of the cathedral, so to speak. So as an individual, you're not very important. This is the Eastern kind of approach. And again, it's very different from modern Western approach where we are individuals, right? So we are pissed off at being just a cog in the machine, whereas East Asians, they are kind of happy. Well, I mean, it's all very subjective, obviously, whether they are happy or not, but they are more used to, at least, of being a part of the play, not the main character, so to speak, right? A decoration, maybe even, or someone who works backstage, something to that effect. Anyways, yeah, well, and even if you look at the modern European buildings, right, like big, like mega projects, they're all finished pretty quickly, you know, I mean, like 10 years or something to that effect. Again, you can argue that it's also, you can blame capitalism on this, where again, but it's all connected, I think, right? It's not like capitalism appeared in a vacuum and then was implanted in European civilization. The European civilization, with its individualism, has brought capitalism forth, right? And therefore, like, since capitalism requires returns in foreseeable future, you can no longer require a cog to, like, you know, it's like you can't require a worker to work for the payment after death, right? Sometime later, like when the cathedral would be finished, you would be paid. But you're saying, well, it's going to be finished after I'm dead. And they're saying, well, yeah, okay, so what? Well, it doesn't work in capitalism, right? You have to pay right away. So yeah. There was something I wanted to mention briefly, but I forgot. The Christianity, right? Christianity actually tells you, and some other religions similar to Christianity, they actually tell you that you will be repaid after your death, right? So it's this sort of like a missing link almost between these older traditions where we've had appreciation towards things beyond our own life. I mean, these bigger things like civilization, like culture, like nation, like, well, nations only appeared in the 19th century. More like genus, I don't know the English word, like the generations, you know, like family in a very extended sense, tribe, something like this, you know. Yeah. So, and Christianity is kind of also appreciating this with saying, or at least partly, you know, by saying, well, you are a cog during your life, but after your death, you will be repaid, kind of like this, right? And then capitalism goes and says, well, just get paid right now. Like, don't wait for your death, right? So we have this transition from the ancient times where you were appreciating things bigger than life, then Christianity, where you were appreciating things that are bigger than your life, but only because you will be repaid after your death. And then capitalism, where you don't appreciate things bigger than your life because you want to get paid right now, right? Something to that effect. Yeah. I could have spoken about many other things, but let's just conclude. Hopefully, there were a couple of ideas that you enjoyed here and that would make you think, all right? And this is just the singular objective of this video, is to provoke some thinking on your part. So, conclusions is that people actually desire some sort of big event to happen and to finalize some sort of process. And like, firstly, because it's hard for us to perceive processes in the first place, and secondly, when we do perceive processes, we become jealous that processes may actually be bigger than ourselves, us as individuals, and we hate that. And therefore, we almost will into being the end of any process, right? And this is what we want. The end of the world, right? The world is bigger than us. The earth is older than us. We want it all to end during our lifetime, right? Something like that. So yeah, to have our revenge on it, obviously. So the tragedy of life itself is that it has no end, as I've said in one of my previous videos, because again, life can be, then you're alive, or it cannot be, then there's no you in the first place, right? So in some way, death is something we wish to be there, but it's never there. So you're either alive or there's no you. Like the end of life doesn't exist in some sense. Paradoxically. we just proven that death doesn't exist, right? Death does exist, but only for others. So it never exists for the one who's dying. That's kind of, again, the tragedy of life. You cannot put life on pause. You cannot stop it. Life is just either there or there is nothing that is alive to speak of. That's the construction. Hopefully you can see what I'm saying. And this is, by the way, the point the Epicureans made, Lucretius in particular, but yeah. They said, like, don't worry about your death. It's either you are alive or there is no you, right? There is no death. There's nothing to be worried about. Like, death is something that your friends would worry about, your death, right? Because they would witness your death, but death doesn't exist for you. And at this optimistic note, let's finish this video. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.